access the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey, fellow Owens, welcome to the podcast of OA episode number 222. We are doing something a little different this time. We're trying to do this by video as well as audio. So on YouTube, you'll be able to see our interviews and get to see our ugly bugs while we're doing the show. But we thought we'd try something different for these next two episodes because we've got something special coming up. Tonight, we're going to be talking with Jeremy Adams, the writer of the new Green Lantern series. And in our next episode coming out next week, we're going to be talking with Philip Kennedy Johnson on the John Stewart half of the new Green Lantern book. So I'm Myron Rumsey, and I'm joined by my good friend, Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, this is exciting. This is fun.
No, this is a good time, man. I'm looking forward to talking to both these guys. I mean, just big fan of both. You know, I'm excited. The first Green Lantern book it's really good, and I think it's going to go places. That first issue just hit right out of the cylinders, man.
Yeah.
I knew reading it. I knew with a few pages in, I was like, okay, this is going to be good and different. And then by the time I was done with it, I was like, well, I'll put it this way. Usually, when we talk about when a new writer comes on, so usually 3 or 4 issues in, you know, you get a general sense on if you like it or not. I liked it right off the first issue.
Sometimes one issue in.
Yeah. And and liking it right off the one issue, I already know that I'm not going to have a tainted image moving forward, because I already know it's generated enough in me to push forward moving through these issues that it's going to be a relatively good story.
Yeah. And just in terms of our show and this content, we're going to try something a little different. Like I said, I talked about doing the YouTube thing. I haven't quite figured out the logistics of doing the Know Your Core segment, so we're going to skip that for this time. The same listener feedback, because I don't have the logistics of that part worked out yet. I think I've got it figured out, but what we're going to do. But what we're going to do is record this on video, put it to YouTube, and then take the audio and make the regular iPad, iTunes podcast, and everywhere else you can find us on, Spotify and all those good things. So we're going to do that too. In terms of Green Lantern news, I think the only thing that's new, that other than talking about the new book, is Hallmark is doing a mini Green Lantern power battery Christmas ornament, which might be a little too big for action figures, but I know I'm buying a couple to find out anyway. But it's a little mini Hallmark ornament that lights up. So that's kind of cool.
I got the ones those Hallmark, they really did some good ones. I still got the Superman phone booth where he turns.
Oh, cool.
He's got a light on in the top of it, I think, and he's Clark Kent, and then it like turns over, and then it's Superman on the other side.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
I've got the other ones they've done of Green Lantern. This one's kind of neat because it lights up. Like I said, it might be too big for an action figure, but I guess it depends on the figure. It'll be interesting to see when it comes out. It comes out in October, if I recall.
Cool. I'll be getting it.
So that's neat. But that's it in terms of Green Lantern news. And I am really excited to talk to Jeremy. For those that don't know, he wrote 2 episodes of Green Lantern, the animated series. He wrote the episode Scarred and the episode Blue Hope, which brought the Blue Lanterns into the animated series. So he obviously has some experience writing Green Lantern. And I'm excited. After reading, DC sent us a preview of the first issue. I think the only thing it didn't have in it was the little blurb in the front that talks about what's going on in the Green Lantern universe, kind of the setup page. Mm-hmm. That wasn't in there. But what we do know from what was released from some of the previews, that things are changing in the Green Lantern universe, and we'll see what's going on. I don't want to spoil anything because we're recording this on May 4th. By the way, happy Star Wars Day.
May the 4th be with you. Oh,
yes,
and just remember, tomorrow is Revenge of the 5th.
That's right. And I'm hoping if all goes well, we will have this episode out Friday night, so either late Friday afternoon or sometime Friday night, either and on YouTube and everything else. Yeah, the doing this on video changes some of what I normally do to create the episode, but I think if we can make this work, I think from a YouTube perspective, it'll be more interesting for viewers to watch us than perhaps listen to us. So it may change the podcast in some ways. We'll see, but I certainly don't want to abandon the audio format, but this is going to be a little different.
A little different, and maybe it's a choice and an option for other people. Like you
Yeah.
said, sometimes I don't want to look at somebody's ugly mug for a long enough
Right.
time to listen to them.
I don't want to look at this, but for some people want to, and it's interesting in doing an interview, you get to see our reactions versus just hearing our voice. So
Right.
that could be a good thing or a bad thing. It depends. I've got to do a video of the Lantern Cave because people have wanted to see what this place looks like. And so you can see some of it on camera here if you're watching this on YouTube. I definitely intend on doing a little tour per se, and I've got some YouTube content I want to make. So I'm kind of branching out and trying to do some new things too.
Okay, so not only do I fully endorse the tour thing because I haven't been on a full tour of it yet, but just to let fans out there know, there's not many people that are allowed in the cave that Myron has made out there. I just saw his wife in there earlier, and I can tell you right now that's the only known being I've ever seen enter that cave. So
And
you're
live to
privileged,
tell the tale.
and you're privileged to walk in the greatness of that cave.
This is a lifetime of collecting. Uh and I can only fit about 70% of it in here. So the other 30% is in storage. I
Well,
rotate things in and out.
in case you're wondering, we're still looking for a new house, and if you want to ship it to the new address, I'll send you it right away.
You could be the annex of the Lantern Cave. All right, well, let's take a quick break. Like I said, we're not going to be doing a Know Your Core segment, and we're not going to use our usual bumpers for the video version, at least, until I can figure out maybe what to do there. But we'll be back in just a moment and talk with Jeremy Adams about Green Lantern. Well,
Recording
welcome
in
back to the
progress.
podcast of OA, and we are joined by Jeremy Adams, the writer of the new Green Lantern series. Jeremy, welcome to the podcast of OA.
Oh, I feel like this is a long time coming. As a fan of a fan of you guys. You guys are the torchbearers for the longest time, man.
Thanks. I do have to get one non-Green Lantern thing out of the way.
Sure.
So I was talking with my wife, and she is a huge Supernatural fan.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, in my house, I don't call it Supernatural. I call it Kolchak for Cougars.
That's not untrue.
So I told her I was interviewing you, and
Yeah.
I said, you wrote the Scooby Natural episode, and you wrote another episode in the last season, and that you were the story editor for the last season. And she goes, I want you to let him know that I am not over it.
Well, this is so okay. First of all, so listen, in live action writing, story editing is really just kind of a hierarchical name. In some writing, it could be different. My job, my literal job. So after Jim and I wrote Scooby Natural, Jim Krieg, they came to me and they said, "Hey, we want you to come on staff," but they said, "We don't want you to do anything with the arc. Like, your job is just to come up with some weird ideas." I'm like, "Great, here are 10." And they were like, "All of those are too weird." So I pulled back, and in the last season, though the title is story editor, because under the WGA that means something in terms of pay and stuff. I did 2 episodes. One was like a Roadhouse episode with Christian Kane, which, they sing the Dukes of Hazzard theme song, which is ridiculous. And I kept trying to get the showrunner to let me get hit in the head with a bottle or be part of the bar fight, which they wouldn't let me do. And then I did one where Mrs. Butters, who's Miss Butters, who's a wood nymph who takes care of the boys inside the headquarters, and it was really funny. I got to use the Ghostbusters, not the Ghostbusters main theme, but one of the ones from the movie. So my job was really just come up with some wacky stuff, and I understand she's not over it, but that's not my fault. I literally did pitch that at the end because we were going to do the series wrap of that series, and COVID hit, and the week before, and it was like, oh, okay, we could still go. And I'm super optimistic. I'm like, it'll blow over in a couple of days, And next thing I know, it was like, oh, the series wrap. We never got to have a series wrap party for it. And then the last couple episodes, or I think the last episode, they hadn't shot yet. And the last episode was going to be slightly different, where Dean was going to go into a roadhouse, a bar, because that's his idea of heaven, and there was going to be all the people he knows, and we were going to get everybody back to have this thing, and it was kind of a maudlin ending still. I mean, it's not maudlin, but it's just like, oh, they're dead and in heaven, so that's kind of weird. And I was like, listen, we need to go Doc Brown on this thing. We need that Castiel comes break in and goes, Dean, Sam, I need you. And they're like, oh no. And I said, no, listen, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it doesn't matter. You will have had that. And if you get no more work, that is the tease that's going to get people going, I need another series.
Right.
Well, anyways, watch it.
So I had to get that out of the way just for marital bliss.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I understand. Happy wife, happy life.
That's right. But to swing it back around, involving Jim Krieg, one of your first writing credits was working on Green Lantern the Animated Series. You wrote 2 of the episodes.
Yeah.
I think it's probably how we started following each other, because I was gonzo for the show. But what do you bring from working on those 2 episodes? What from that experience kind of informs how you're approaching this series and Hal and Kilowog?
Well, I mean, listen, that was my first credit. I've been trying to break into the industry for a long time, and it's a bit of a religious story for another time. But I got on that show, Ernie Altbacker, Giancarlo, Jim Krieg, and I remember the first thing. I'll relate it to the series in a minute, but the lesson up front was I wrote the script, I sent it in. Giancarlo had notes, and one of the notes was, I'm sure you've heard this, maybe you've heard the story. He goes, it would be really great in this episode is like a space worm, like a giant worm. I was like, what is he talking about? And Jim was like, listen, man, the job is if he wants a talking mustache, you write the best talking mustache, I was like, all right, cool. So, I write this space worm in Blue Hope, and it's like this weird, underground dune worm, whatever. And then the second episode, I got a similar note, came back and said, we could use some like space whales. And I'm like, is Giancarlo watching too much National Geographic or something? Like, what is happening? So I write it in there, and as with anything animation, you write it in and you wait a couple of years and then you get to see it. And when it came out, I thought, holy cow, if those things don't fit perfectly into this stinking story. And it was this real defining moment of you're working in a collaborative craft, and sometimes you can see it and sometimes you can't see it. And sometimes there's people like Giancarlo and Jim that can see a bigger vision. And there's like, their job is to say, we want this thing and you got to just trust us in it. And that was a real kind of profound, very early on moment. It doesn't mean I don't complain about things, but it was like, oh, that's what he does. He's a visual guy, and he's looking at this and saying, hey, we need something here. And I have to trust him in that. In the same way I have to trust the artist in Green Lantern or Flash or whatever. But the other thing was what I'm bringing from that experience into this Green Lantern run. I remember walking into their little writer's room. It wasn't a writer's room. I think it was either Jim's office or Ernie's office or something. And they had printed off pictures of Kilowog and Razor and Aya and Hal. And I'm trying to think, I know definitively the picture that they had under Hal, and it was Captain Kirk. And it was like, under Kilowog, I think was Bones or something. I don't know. And I remember thinking like, oh, okay. Like now I immediately knew who that character was in a way. This like leader, charismatic, strong. And it wasn't 1-for-1, obviously, but it was kind of like a North Star of like, this is kind of the character that we're writing. And that is kind of the character I'm trying to write in this book. And it's not perfectly Captain Kirk. It's not perfectly Maverick from Top Gun. There's a lot of that vibe in there. It's almost like there's a lot of like weirdly like Kevin Costner from Bull Durham. There's this kind of like this very self-assured guy, but who's deep and introspective and stuff. Because Hal hasn't had the spotlight in a long time. There's a little bit of me wanting to figure out who he is personally, and also my goal is to make other people like Hal Jordan, because there's been this weird thing where people are just like, I don't like Hal Jordan, and he's been kind of the butt of the joke for some things, and that's always distasteful to me in a weird way. And I'm like, no, I want you to like Hal Jordan, and if you don't like Hal Jordan, I'm going to try to make you like Hal Jordan. That's my goal. because I want you to be excited about this character, and I want you to know who this character is, because sometimes comic book characters, especially in the Silver Age, sometimes it was like it was just a cipher. It was like, here's a guy with a ring and he does this thing, and I'm hoping to go a little deeper than that.
That's good. I like that. And you know, and that shows creative value, you know, towards the character and towards the book. Because a lot of that you can pick up on a lot of that with a lot of stuff you people write. I mean, like I'll use Philip Kennedy as an example with reading his Flash book. You know, I remember reading Flash many times before it, but when Kennedy came on, I remember so much depth that he built into the Flash mythos, and it kind of expanded. A lot of it was in comparison to what Jeff Johns did with Green Lantern, you know, back when he expanded all these Lantern Corps or whatnot. You know,
you mean Williamson, when Williamson did it?
Yeah. Williamson. Sorry, I was on the wrong guy. Williamson.
No. I get it, because Philip Kennedy Johnson is always at the forefront of all of our minds.
Right.
So
True.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right.
But and that's what it takes for a writer to come on, which, you know, leads me to the question with you. I mean, and hopes with this book moving forward. You know, I know you're going to bring your particular brand to the character, which any writer should. Do you hope to expand on the Lantern Corps itself? Is there a bigger picture? And I don't want to know the bigger picture, but is there a bigger picture for you that you see in the forefront of your writing?
So, like, listen, as a writer, I'm like level 11 imposter syndrome, and I'm fairly new at comic books, right? And the Flash is was a family book that's really zany and kind of it leans more on the goofy than it is the non-goofy. So this is tonally very different for me. And because of the last series, Jeff Thorne's series, ended a particular way, I can't just go, oh, that didn't happen, or whatever. And I find it to be a really cool jumping off point to tell a story. And that story, this is the thing. This is the talk about my fear. I need the willpower to overcome this fear. Is I want people to be invested in Hal and the reason that he's on Earth, and the kind of like not the regret, but like the worry that maybe he made the wrong decision, and why he's on Earth and why Sinestro's on Earth, because that is going to lead. And if everybody sticks around, and my fear is that people are going to go, it's not cosmic enough, because it's not cosmic right away. That is something that editorial asked me not to do. And it was also something like, great, I can tell the story. We can get to know Hal. And then once we know him and once we care for him, then we can start uncovering what's happening outside of Earth, which I have a pretty big story about what that is. Because right now, the way that it was left off was the Guardians are gone or dead. We don't know. The Lantern battery is destroyed. There's a rainbow marble called the Source somewhere on Oa, and the United Planets are kind of the ones in charge of the Corps. And if you remember, at the end of the John Stewart Emerald Knight, it was like there was Green Lanterns that changed emotional spectrum.
Right.
So it's like, what is going on out there, right? And from a storytelling point of view, I'm like, I know, Hal doesn't know. And we're going to be reading the fact that Hal doesn't know. But I don't want anybody to think for a minute that I don't know, and I don't want to address it, because I desperately do. But I have to be cognizant of, like, I have to build it. I have to get everybody excited about who Hal is. And this is a chance to mess with some of the cool old Hal Jordan villains, introduce some new villains, really solidified who this guy is. So when we care enough about him and we start taking him on this other journey, hopefully people will be along with it. I mean, it's different just because when was the last time you had a Green Lantern on Earth for an extended period of time? It's been a long time.
Well, that first book was, I mean, I'll be honest with you, the first book was a combination of the last, Myron, year and a half of I mean, it was a really good, it was a jumping off point, because when I first read it, I was actually really, really surprised, because we have not had some good books, and that's no disservice to anybody. It's just, you like one writer, sometimes you don't like a writer. It's just the way it goes. But when I read this book, I read it and I was like, wow. I was shocked with how taken I was with it.
Good.
And it got me on. And I remember texting Myron. I'm like, okay, I was a bit surprised by that, but wow, okay.
Well,
And
that's
then
good to hear. I mean, listen, even if you hate it, the art's going to be amazing because Zermanico is amazing.
oh well, yeah, that's
And
true.
secondly, Philip Kennedy Johnson has such an incredible thing going on with Jon Stewart, and it's too good. It makes me mad.
DC was gracious to send us an advanced reader copy of the first issue, and I think I saw it on Twitter. I think I posted it on Twitter, but I couldn't be more happy with it. So
well, that carries big weight out there in the Green Lantern universe.
No, not really.
Yeah,
not really.
I think it does. Listen,
Myron cuts himself short all the time. He doesn't know how far his voice reaches, and I keep telling this guy. I mean, I got on what? I'm going on 6 years now with you, Myron.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you've been, and this predates, and I've been on his show before, predating when I jumped on with him. And I keep trying to tell him, I was like, man, any person can come up to you, ask you a Green Lantern question. You will know.
Yeah.
End of discussion, he will know. And he always does.
I think that's pretty cool. I also,
evolved.
Listen, this is kind of a weird, comic books is a niche into itself. And something like you saying, hey, I liked it, carries a huge amount of weight because, we've all seen comic guys come out with a book and somebody says, this is garbage. And then it's dead, it's just people not even reading it. The only thing I wish I could impress upon people, especially the younger generation, because they don't really understand, they think it's okay to just download and steal and whatever these things. And they have a lot of different reasons for it. But what I wish I could impress upon them, because this happens in animation a lot too, is the razor's edge between something being canceled and something staying on. It's so small. It's so small. And the fact that if somebody could just give up their Starbucks for one morning, you could keep a book on the shelf, or you could keep a movie, another movie going. And it's so crazy how low the bar is to keep something going. And people just go, nah, I'm just gonna pirate that sucker. And I'm like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. You're killing the thing. Because how many Batman books are out, right? It's like 15 an hour. And it's and everybody's like, why aren't they doing more? It's because people aren't buying them.
Yep. So one thing that fans have picked up on from the preview pages is immediately was the visual change to Hal's outfit, that we've gone to the shoulders look. Is that something intentional? Is there a reason behind it, story-driven wise, or is it just an artistic choice?
So I think because this is kind of a Hal on Earth in a way, like a throwback way. I think that's part of it. I think that's just hey, we really want to visually show that this is kind of a coming home. This is kind of an older style, not an older style book, but this is like Hal at his roots, And that wasn't necessarily my listen, like I said, I've said this before, I can barely dress myself. So if they give me an opinion about what Hal's costume would be like, I would be like, I don't know. Is it green? Okay. But luckily, Zermanico he's on top of it. And Paul Kaminsky, who's my editor, he's really passionate about this being, an earthbound, back to basics. I think that's what the whole Dawn of DCU is supposed to be, is this kind of back to basics, getting people excited about individual toys in the toy chest. And that's my job. I mean, like I said, my job is to get people excited about Hal, get people excited about, him being when was the last time he crime fighted? And I'm such a DC nerd that I'm like, and when was the last time he hung out with other superheroes? Unless it's like a splash page of some giant event. And I'm like, but I kind of want to, have him interact with all these people that he spent huge amounts of times with. I want him to spar with Ollie. I want him to, talk to his nephew Wally. I want him to, internally laugh at Batman, like all that stuff, and because that makes you feel like it's a giant universe that he's part of, and he hasn't done that for a long time.
I agree. All right, so that brings up my next question then. So we get a brief glimpse of Carol at the beginning.
Yes.
I'm going to assume that, and I hope, and you don't have to, like I said, you got a plan, and I don't want to know anything about it because I can't wait to see what it does unfold.
Yeah.
But I hope that we count on her showing up in the future.
Yeah. I mean, listen, she's
She's important.
she's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I haven't necessarily decided on yet.
Okay.
Is, this is a story about a guy who, for all intents and purposes was on, he has a job that sends him away, whether it's like a military guy or whatever. And what happens when you come back and the world has moved on?
Mm.
And is it fair, even though, the woman you love has moved on? Is it fair to inject yourself into that situation? And I don't know. I don't know the answer.
That's a good point. That's really a good point.
So it's like, I love them too, but is it fair to that character? And
I hadn't thought about it that way, but that is a really good point you make.
right. And by the way, it might be. As far and that's to say, it's like, if people are like, oh, they're not gonna be together, I don't know. I know that I'm really enjoying this is the best way to describe it. In my mind, sometimes Hal acts like I was in college, which isn't necessarily the most altruistic, where it was like, I had an ex-girlfriend who broke up with me because, we were on and again, off again, and she broke up with me because she met another guy. And I was like, okay. And in my head, I was like, and now I'm going to get you back, and I'm going to try really hard, and I would do the craziest, most hilarious things where, like, the guy would buy her like this little picture and I would buy her a giant poster. Like, I would just one up him, like, constantly. And eventually I did get her back, and then immediately broke up with her, which is terrible. But I'm 21, right, or 20, and I'm an idiot. And I think about Hal in terms of, like, is this what he really wants, or is this what he thinks he wants? And also, this is him coming home and trying to figure out how do you have a life on Earth when you've seen the vast riches of the universe? And the first thing I thought of was, like, I wonder how much money he has in his bank account. Like,
right?
Like $13 or something.
It's more like, does he have money in his account?
Does he have money in his bank account? Does he even have a credit card? Like, what? Like, all that stuff was really interesting to me, because he's this guy who's returning home. And again, it's like, the one constant in his life is really Carol, ever since he was a little kid, and now, and so that she is kind of home in a way. So really exploring that is going to be interesting to me.
Yeah. We did a whole episode exploring their relationship, and I went back and traced their entire, like, how many times did they get together, how many did they break up, who split with who, and
right.
Their relationship has always been very cyclical.
Yeah.
For various reasons. And I think sometimes for Hal, there's to do a Star Trek nerd call out. Sometimes the wanting is better than the having.
Sure.
Sure. There's some of that.
Yeah, there is. But this is interesting. This is a real comic book conversation that's happening in everything. You hear it. I hear it inadvertently about Spider-Man, because of what I'm doing in the Flash sometimes. And I think about it in the Flash because I think what I was able to do is show you that you can have a mature relationship that moves and grows and et cetera, and you can still tell stories, and that's not bad.
Right.
And now we're seeing in the DC universe, it's like, oh, Superman family, okay, Green Arrow family. Like, now there's a lot of families, going on.
Yeah,
and that's not necessarily bad. It's unique, and I'm kind of excited about it, because as well as I know, that DC sometimes does the Etch-a-Sketch with their continuity because things get too complicated.
Yeah,
and I hope they don't, because I think it's a real chance to tell some interestingly different stories. And as the way I've been talking about this, I thought about this today. I had an interview earlier today, and we were talking about how, like, Dark Crisis, Williamson was really pushing in on the fact that the legacy heroes are kind of having their moment. All the sidekicks are growing up and having their moment, and there's no Justice League, and the Titans are kind of there and all that stuff. And as interesting as that is, I keep thinking, so what does that mean for the guys that were there before? And I remember mentoring this kid, and, like, seeing him drink a beer for the first time and me like slapping it out of his hand, like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm 26. I'm like, wait, what? You know, like oh, you're allowed to drink. But the idea that like the world's moving on in a way, and how does Hal handle that? You know,
right.
It's like his nephew has three. I touched on this a little bit in the Flash 1 Minute War. It's like Iris says to Barry, like, your sidekick has 3 kids. Like your sidekick is married with 3 kids. We aren't engaged. You know, like what's going on? So I that's the element of how coming back to Earth and seeing it's moved on in certain ways. And is there a place for him? And who is he in that place? Because Sector 2814 is quarantined. At the beginning of the story, he doesn't have a ring. He's not a hero. What does that mean? You know? So
and you do some good things in that first issue that talks about Hal as a character and what does he do when he doesn't have a ring,
right?
And how his career adapts to modern technology and some of the things that happen, which is a lot of fun because it's the logical extension of it all.
Right, right,
and it's relevant too because I mean modern technology is at our hands. Yeah.
Right.
But also, it's going to peel back into a bit more. Obviously, I do like present day and like a month earlier, and so we'll start to uncover different aspects of the mystery, and hopefully it'll converge in a way that we can move forward and really get into what's going on. So there's like 2 issues of Green Lantern, and then it crosses over with Night Terrors. Mm-hmm. And then we go back to the regular scheduled programming, you know. So I'm hoping people will stay on and check it out. I've tried to write a Night Terror that will really pump up Green Lantern fan, you know, because if this thing is a being or a thing that exploits nightmares and fear, and you've got this guy that really, you know, he's like, you know, invulnerable.
He's like, bring it on,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. That's how I look at it, anyway.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a mention in the advanced, like what's coming up next kind of thing, and there's a mention of a set of characters that have some history with Green Lantern. Maybe can I? Is it okay if I say it?
I don't know.
It mentions Demolition Team.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Listen, you're gonna get a lot of like deep cuts in a way.
Yeah.
And I won't spoil too much, but it is fun because I become friendly with Jeff Johns, and it is fun to kind of like send him something and see him go, wait, what? You know, or whatever. So
I got to ask, with Kilowog on Earth, are we going to see anything with the Rocket Red Brigade?
You'll have to wait and find out.
You knew he was gonna say
I
that.
mean, my thing is, it was funny because I was just up in Calgary at Calgary Fan Expo, and I had a lot of questions about Green Lantern characters and stuff. And you'll even see some of the Green Lantern villains in my little story in Flash 800. It's my segue into things. But I'm getting more acclimated with them, especially the weirder ones that I'm like, oh, what? And again, because Hal is Earthbound, I want him to have some Earthbound. Villains to fight. But I also think there's going to be some cosmic stuff that happens, because if Sector 2814 is quarantined, then I think that will make it a safe haven for some really bad people, you know.
Good. I can't wait for it, because as somebody who's been reading for half a century,
ages, right? You're going to be like, I can't believe he pulled this. Yeah. And by the way, that's one of the fun things for me, because I try to do a lot of research. I'm not perfect at it, because like the Flash is on issue 800, and Green Lantern, and I thought the Flash mythology was crazy. Green Lantern's mythology is crazy. And it's deep, changing continuity, this, that, the other. And obviously Jeff and Tomasi, when they came on and they kind of revolutionized the core in an interesting way with the emotional spectrum. I'm not going to, I don't want to play with that yet too much, because it's been done a lot. And again, I think this is going to focus on, one of the things I'm focused on is not just making Hal great, but trying to use constructs in a really interesting way. and have fun with it, because I have this artist that is, he is my Green Lantern ring. Like I can like write it down and he's like, oh yeah, but he shows me something amazing. There's a scene in issue 2 that is like, I got it and I was like, oh yes, this is amazing. So it's not going to be just a punching bag or like a boxing glove across the face. I really want to try to push to make it, the constructs interesting. That was something that when Kyle was Green Lantern, that was really cool. There's like all these
cool artists, man. He was an artist, so there was an interesting thing I read about constructs in the Green Lantern and the engineering possibilities behind it, and if the brain can actually function at a higher rate enough to build an actual construct gun that has firing mechanisms. But a lot of time the other argument was, well, it can just do it because his willpower says it can do it. Little scientists like, that's not an answer.
Yeah. But I mean, listen, that when Hal Jordan came onto the scene, there was a lot of weirdo powers that he had.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, he de-evolved a shark,
right.
Like it's like, what's that? What? Huh?
So how do you, sometimes writers have a hard time with Hal looking like he's overly reckless.
Yeah.
I've always in my head have always thought about it like the OODA loop. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the OODA loop.
No.
But the OODA loop is like people who process and come to decision making faster, like pro athletes, and fighter pilots. It falls into that, and so he's processing the outcomes, not like Batman, but he's coming to a decision about what he's going to do, and he also feels like, well, I'm going to put myself in danger because I know I can absorb it better than the guy next to me. So sometimes he comes off looking reckless. And how do you find the sweet spot between confidence and cockiness?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. And I'll tell you, the times that I hate Hal is when people push him too far into cockiness.
Yeah.
Because the ring came to him for a reason. And that's how I feel. It's like he was chosen for a reason. And it wasn't just, oh, you're a cocky a-hole or whatever. It's like, yeah, he has this willpower ability, but I do think, especially if I'm going to, maybe at the beginning, maybe he was he's cocky, but like, it's now tempered by years and years of going through massive amounts of trauma, leading troops into battle, seeing people die, seeing, loved one. Like all of that has to change you as a person.
Right.
And not only that, but like, I think it's hysterical. Like, listen, he was God's spirit of vengeance for a while, like he has to have some sort of, conscious thought that pushes him beyond cockiness into confidence. And it's like you said, I think he thinks quickly. I think he goes with his gut more than maybe his head. And that can lead to some reckless situations, but also he saved the universe a few times that way too. So I don't like to. I think some people write him as a jerk. They mistake it.
Yeah.
He's not Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner is a specific piece of Green Lantern that I love dearly, but he's also a jerk, and that's what makes him fun for everybody. And Hal isn't that guy. He's confident. Like he's the guy that's like, it chose me. And he's not John Stewart, like Philip's writing a John Stewart that has the weight of the world on his shoulders in a way, like there's something beyond him. I think Hal is living in the moment a little bit, but I also think he's growing up in a big way too.
He's here for a good time, not a long time in his mind.
Right? I think that has traditionally been what he is. I think that's why this is going to be an interesting story, because you can do that for a long time, but at a certain point you gotta think, is this what I want to keep doing?
Right.
And is this what's the most important thing for me to do? And that's going to be the real internal struggle with him.
So when you first got the call or whatever it was that you were going to be doing Green Lantern, how excited were you?
Oh, I wasn't.
I didn't think so.
No, because I got the call. The call was, hey, we're taking you off of the Flash. And by the way, would you like to do Green Lantern? I was like, oh, maybe. And I was so heartbroken about the Flash. I'm not even kidding. I became so attached to those characters that it was in my head. I was like, yeah, of course you're going to take the of course you're going to take Green Lantern. But I didn't want them to know, Right. I was so sad about the Flash. And then my first call was Jeff. And I said, oh, they're going to take me off the Flash. I'm so sad. And he goes, what? And I said, yeah, but they want to give me Green Lantern. He's like, yes! Like, oh, yeah, you're going to kill it. And I was like, yeah, and when Jeff John's telling you you're going to kill it, you better kill it, and that's how I felt about it. So then it was like, this and it was really funny because they said, hey, we want you to do this. And I was like, oh no. And then I, called back and I don't even know what the story is or whatever. And we were driving up to my in-laws' house. That's about, I was a couple hours away. It was like 3 hours away, 3 or 4 hours away. And from the moment we got in the car and then we got there and I was like, this is what it's going to be. Like, I already knew what the story was going to be. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew who was going to be involved. There are like wiggle room for changes, obviously, because of what comes up, but I knew what it was going to be. And then I suddenly started getting a little excited about it. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And it's not like I don't have any knowledge or experience with Green Lantern. But it was also juxtaposed with that other thing,
Yeah.
I'm really glad to see the story being kind of a personal story, because sometimes Hal he's often used like Indiana Jones, where he's critical to the plot's resolution, but character development is kind of in the back seat. And one of the things that I picked up on in this first issue was some of your musical choices. And to me, it obviously intentional, but it's kind of talking about how this is going to be a real personal journey for Hal, and it might not be easy for him to navigate it. So how much is this going to be a character study? Is it going to be as much character study as adventure story? How are you going to be balancing it out? I mean, you made comments about it's going to be personal.
Listen, if you pick up a comic, you want to see some cool action. Like, right. I am not that guy. Like, I would get too bored. I'm too ADD that I would be like, oh, they're just talking the other time. And the other thing is, I'm constantly like, I'm worried. I want Sir Manico to be excited about the things that he's drawing. If it was just panel after panel of people talking, and to be fair, I think, especially the first episode, there's a lot of setup. And it scares me because I'm like, oh, I need to get to some, awesome constructs, but it's going to be a balancing act, because exactly what you said, that's how I felt sometimes, is that, like I said, he's a cipher. People just imprint their own idea or like own characterizations on him, but we haven't got to go as there have been versions that have got to go deeper, but I want to go deeper in a way that's like
unique.
I just want to know him as a human. I want to see that he is confident, but he's also like everybody that thinks like, did I make the right decision here? And it's not out of fear. It's not necessarily out of doubt. It's just kind of like, well, it might be doubt in a way, but just like normal humans have doubt. So I'm excited to give him a little bit of this color that I hope will not only have people empathize with him, but that will stick with him so that people can know who he is as a character. I think they've done an incredible job making John Stewart a character. I think that Guy Gardner is a great character. When Guy Gardner was in JLI and he was a complete jerk, and then he went into a pacifist mode, and then he came back to a jerk, and you're like, oh, I love to hate this guy. But it was like his relationship with Ice was just like, oh, he's a little softer than everybody thinks he is, and that makes him even greater, And then they've obviously built out some of these other characters, but with Hal, I feel like they've always written him above it in a way. And there's tons of Green Lanterns, so this is a chance to kind of like, who is this guy? Why should I care?
Right. Well, and it's often like there's no real character study. You learn about him like Indiana Jones. You learn about him by interpreting his actions and what does that mean? Or
and the fans have been really great, because and that I did this with the Flash too. Like I hadn't planned on bringing Pied Piper back in the Flash, and it was fans that were like cluing me. And I had known that he was part of the Flash book, but figuring out, oh my gosh, he really was a super important part of that book, and so bringing him back was important for me, but it was important for the book, and it was important for the character. Same way, somebody had hit me up on Twitter and was talking about like Hal's Jewish upbringing, or like, being Jewish. And I was like, what? I didn't know that. And so now it's like, oh, that gives me a piece of the pie that I wasn't familiar with, that now fits into my head. And I'm like, I have to make sure that's always there, so that can inform, even if it's little or a lot, can inform some things about the character.
Right. Yeah, Hal's mother was Jewish and his father was Catholic.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's
it
like,
adds depth to the character, and it also adds the trueness to form,
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a good example. There for a while, people were calling Hal a himbo, and because he was having a lot,
right.
And he really
He's Captain Kirk.
he didn't have a lot of relationships really when you go back and look at it. But I always looked at it as, well, here's a guy who saw his father die and saw what his father's career did to his mother, and he would never put someone he cares about in that same position. So I'm going to be standoffish, or I'm not going to let anybody in because I don't want them to get attached to me, because I don't want them to be afraid about what I do.
Yeah, I think that's probably the crux of the push and pull of Carol and his relationship too.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And it's like it's easier to leave than to dig in, right? Like I when I got married, everybody gives you advice, and you should read this book on marriage, or you should do this, and it's like the book on marriage, it's like written by somebody who's been married for 5 years, and it's just like, what could they possibly know? And it was like this old couple that got up, and they had been married for like 60 years. I'm like, that's the people that I want to talk to, And when they're talking about how, true love isn't this thing at the beginning. True love is the thing that comes from after your heart flutters and stuff. It's through all the bad times. It's the work. It's the raising kids, all that stuff. Yeah. And with Hal, the trauma of his dad, obviously. Dad dying informs a great deal of, doesn't it, with all of us, like our parents' trauma,
right.
informs what we do. And I could totally see him being, Carol's too important for me to screw it up.
Yes. Yep. I not to get too personal, but I was born with a rare birth defect, and so I grew up thinking I'm not going to be around past my 40s. I mean, I actually had a doctor say that you would make it to 40 when I was a kid. Talk about screwing with somebody's head. So I didn't want to get married. I didn't want to have kids. Yeah. And I met my wife. My wife and I have been friends for over 40 years. We've been married for 35.
Wow.
And it took a while for me to realize I am going to live to be old.
Right.
I am going to retire, because I was very much like Hal in that I would do stupid crap.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I may not get the chance to do this again, or I may not be around to enjoy it. And
what's the point?
If I get money, I'm going to just spend it, because I'm not going to be here to retire. You do those things for different reasons. It's irrational as all get out, but that's the human experience.
Yeah. I mean, listen, my cousin has cystic fibrosis, and when he was a little kid, they had said to him, like, you probably won't live to be 15 or whatever. Yeah. And now he's my age. But he did. You could tell he purposely didn't want to be with somebody so that they had to be put through the trauma of what he was going through.
Right.
And also, listen, I mean, that's it's not just Hal's personality that he might end up dying, like as a test pilot or whatever. But then you compound that with the fact that now he's part of this intergalactic space force in which he has to, listen, everybody, Clark's got Metropolis and Bruce has got Gotham, and I've got Sector 2814, it's like multiple planets.
Right.
Serious universal problems, it's like that pager ain't ever going off, man,
It's like Superman, right? I mean, that's part of the Superman thing, is if you can hear every crisis going on the planet at once, right, how do you live a life?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a tough thing. I mean, the Superman of it is Superman was born with these powers too, and I think that's interesting about Hal too, is that he was inducted into this brotherhood, and I think they were very reluctant about him, this, Terran jack off, like whatever.
Right.
It's like he's proved himself time and time again, and now he's kind of this legendary, hero in a way. So that's part of this story too, is like, why did this legendary hero leave his family to go back home, and was it worth it? And what does that mean? And what are those guys doing, et cetera, et cetera?
Right.
And will they be talking about him in the stars?
Yeah. I always think I think Hal is a little bit like Rutger Hauer at the end of Blade Runner. It's like, it's a little
that's
like
a good reference. Yeah.
It's like, what, I've seen all these things, but I decided to come home. And that's a hard thing to, row to hoe, as my mom would say.
But yeah, the first issue, I'm very, very happy with it, and I am so excited for this run. I haven't been excited for Green Lantern in a while, and it plays such a huge part of my life. So to be this excited for a book, and I'm not trying to overhype, and I'm being very honest with you.
No, just talk about how trash it is, and then it'll make me feel better.
Well, I mean, also, but also think about it like this. I mean, even talking, you can hear it. You can hear the passion that you have and the approach that you're going to take towards it. So even at worst, I mean, you still have a passion approach to it. So we're going to get some good material out of it, right? So
Totally.
at best, you the whole entire time you've talked tonight, you've talked about how your idea of how Jordan is. Well, that idea takes a while to flesh out. That takes time. And a lot of times, and me and Myron have talked about this, we'll know by issue 4 or 5 if I feel like I'm being duped, or if I feel like what's going on, or if I feel like, okay, is this going to happen anytime soon, or if it's just like, this is not working for me.
Right.
Usually by 4 or 5, you usually know.
Yeah.
This one hit on a cylinder that was different than what happened in prior runs. Even when Morrison and Sharp did it, it took us a few issues to really say, okay, I really like what they're doing with this. And off we ran with it for 2 years.
Yeah.
It's the same can be said with any writer that comes on to something. You give them a chance, and they can prove you wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, and you guys have always been cool with the fans. I know you're active on Twitter and stuff like that. And the fandom's the important part of what I think a lot of people overlook. Like with including us, and just to get here to interview. I mean, we're flattered. Me and Myron are texting like geeks all week about how, I can't wait to talk to him. It's gonna be fun. But that's where the passion lies, is your fandom. And me and Myron have talked ad nauseum about, you can't say enough about fandom. They're the ones that are giving you what you need.
Yeah.
I mean, they're giving you guys your jobs. I mean, not you personally, but they're giving you guys your employment. Yeah. I mean, so when fans get into this little disarray, when they start just throwing their little temper tantrums, sometimes, and like Myron and I, we take a step back.
Well, this is
remain in our corner.
I am a huge fan. That's what's so funny, because like I always say, like I'm fairly new at this, but like I'm the guy that was writing postcards to to Fox when Angel was canceled. I was like, how dare you? Like pre-Twitter. and it's just that, and I get it, because everybody's passionate and everybody has their ships and everybody has their opinions about what can happen and not happen and stuff like that. And I'm one of those people, and it took me a long time to break in. So I have pretty thick skin about, understanding that people are coming from a place of passion.
Yeah.
And I think people know on Twitter, especially, that's how I interact with people about superheroes. Is I always feel like I'm one of you that just got here, a little bit,
Well, and Green Lantern fandom has been so divided because there's been so many characters added, and everybody has their favorite, and everybody wants to see their character, and there's only so many books to go around, because the Green Lantern universe, in terms of a publishing franchise, has shrunk, but we've added more characters. So no matter what DC does, there's going to be a section that aren't going to be happy because it's not their character, and it puts you guys as creatives in a difficult situation, because you're never going to make the entire audience happy. You just aren't.
Right. You can't. And the Green Lantern universe is very top heavy in a way. And you can't make them happy. And I don't write to make fans happy. I kind of write because I get to play with these toys, and this is the story I want to tell with the toys, you know. But
Good way to look at it.
that's not to say that I don't. I'm also greedy, man. I'm Larfleeze. Like I'm like I want to get to those other characters, but I don't want to get to them too fast.
No,
Because
you got to get there slow.
Yeah, if it's unearned, no one's going to care. No one's.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've read a book and I'm like, what a cool splash page that I totally don't care about. You know, like
Right.
that was a great moment that there was no indication it was going to happen. There was no lead up to it. It's like I want to feel that. I want to care about these characters so that when I get to that moment when we see Kyle or we see Guy or we see whoever, that we care about it. That it's exciting. You know, the best way to do it is like you ever see Creed? Did you see that Creed movie?
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. And one of the things that I thought was so fun, because I'm a huge Stallone nut, and I love Rambo, I love Rocky, but one of the most effective things they did in that movie was they didn't use the Rocky theme until the very end. And when that music hit, I wanted to rip a chair out of the ground. Like I was so pumped. And so there's this thing of like, there's all this amazing cast of characters that if we can build the suspense and hint at it when that happens, I think it'll be really big. And the same thing, and what's so peculiar is that Philip is doing this John Stewart story that is definitively a Green Lantern story, but does not necessarily affect the story that I'm doing. And yet we're talking about when can we cross over? When can we bring these stories together and take them apart and stuff like that, which is really, really fun to think about. But he's doing something incredibly exciting with John Stewart too.
One of the things that I saw in that first issue that made me feel good was seeing that there's something in his story that shows that what he's doing and what you're doing are occurring at about the same time. There's a nice little artistic piece that kind of ties it together without tying it together.
Right.
And for me, that's like, I've always looked at like the comics are, we're peeking in on another universe, and this universe is real and in our heads. And and you want it to feel organic, like these things fit together. They don't have to be like tied at the hip.
Yeah.
But you need to feel like there's a fabric to the universe and we're seeing different parts of it. And they may not always interconnect, but there's threads that connect them.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I feel with the DC universe, obviously, when I got on the Flash and no one stopped me, and I just kept like bringing characters and villains in, and I'm just like, wow, no one's stopping me from playing with these other. And it was just, and people were responding to that because they were like, oh, when I was growing up and I read comics, and I remember reading Daredevil Born Again, the Frank Miller Mazzucchelli series, and you're getting near the end, and suddenly Captain America's in the book, and you're like, Captain America's in the book, and you're like, oh, they live in the same universe. The Avengers are there. When you're reading X-Men and like an Avenger shows up or Spider-Man jumps up, or when Secret Wars came onto the scene when I was a kid, I was like, oh, my brain, it's like all these heroes at once. There is something really exciting to know that these characters operate in the same world. And Green Lantern, for the most part, has spent a lot of time away from that world. They're doing cosmic stuff. They're not necessarily messing around with the stuff that's on Earth. And I think that's going to be super fun to see how that works.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be cool to have Hal back and occasionally, run into somebody or talk to somebody or whatever that looks like.
I want to see him having a cup of coffee, like at a random shop with Clark Kent. I think it'd be cool.
Oh, yeah. And that's my point, is like seeing him back and kind of like figure it out. I mean, the dangerous thing is as I get deeper and deeper into the Green Lantern of it all and hearing all the stuff that, like, I just read this thing about how editorial was going to make Hal and Diana a thing. And I was like, oh, don't tell me that. But those are weird ideas. Like they would never let me. But
I often thought that would be an interesting couple.
I'm such a because the Justice League Unlimited series was so good. I was a Wonder Bat guy. I was like, I think Diana and Bruce are great, but I love the idea that the point being that he has this history with these characters that he hasn't really interacted with all that much. I mean, he was part of the Justice League for how long? You know,
Right.
and that doesn't just go away just because he had to go up. And in fact, it's like, especially Green Arrow, you know, I think there's a real special relationship there, obviously, between Hal and Ollie.
Has been for a long time.
Yeah.
I always love the Hal and Ollie and the Hal and Barry and Ollie didn't necessarily.
Yeah.
That was always a neat little triad.
It was like, it was the sub Trinity, right? Like,
yeah.
You had those guys that were like, well, those guys, and those other three were always talking about it too. It's
Well, those three are my Trinity. So
the real Trinity. That's what I should write. I should write an issue where it's like the real Trinity, and they just consider themselves the Trinity. They're like, oh, but we call Bruce. It's just going to be his ideas.
I'll pay the first issue of my highest compliment in that I got done reading the issue, and the thing that came into my head was, I'm home again.
Oh,
it is.
That's great, because that's what it's about, right?
Yeah, and how many episodes have we recorded by Myron? Going back how many times, and we're gearing up, we're getting ready to talk, we're getting ready to get on the episode, and me and Myron are off mic, we're getting set and stuff like that. We're like, okay, here we go. Sometimes it's hard to trudge through, and when you're not into a book that you just don't genuinely care for.
So when you got the first issue, were you, because I'm terrified of it being out in the world, but like, were you trepidatious when you were like, oh, okay, here it comes, I got to turn the page?
Not at all, because
I had a clear palette.
I've watched the animated series so many times, and watching Scarred and Blue Hope, I'm like, I trust this person without even having to open the book.
Well, that is kind, because I was under the wonderful tutelage of Jim Krieg and Giancarlo and Ernie, and Jim's my mentor, boss, friend, like very good friend, and he was always like, in all writing, and I sometimes poo-pooed it, but he's always right when it comes to this. He's like, he always leads with his heart, like always. And he was always leading with his heart in terms of the characters. Like, you have to care about them and care about what's going on. And you see that with Razor and Aya, especially.
Oh yeah.
That becomes this thing where you're like, oh my gosh, I care so deeply for them. The difference is that they were really enjoying with the fact that they were going to just torture the audience with that. We are going to break them up, and it's going to torture you.
And that series needed that, because you when you're working with licensed characters, you can only do so much with them. And Razor and Aya allowed them to tell a story where they could take chances with the characters that maybe they normally couldn't do because it was a licensed property. So much kudos to those guys. I watch that show from beginning to end several times a year because I just
that's awesome. My kids are just of age. I think they're going to enjoy it. So
Clark's watched an episode or two.
What was that?
My little boy Clark, he's 3. He watched a couple episodes.
And enjoyed it. He
doesn't ask for it as much as he does for his other normal programming, but I pop it in there every once in a while. I'll get a book sooner or later.
Yeah. No, we're gonna check it out. It'll just be a good refresher for me too.
I imagine, like, when I watched Scarred, the Book of the Black appearance in that episode was like,
that was a big. I mean, it's too bad, because the live action movie really did. It wasn't the live action movie scuttled it, but it did in a way. Yeah, because I'm sure they've talked about this.
Oh yeah, it was the toy sales.
And they're like, no, we've got an entire dump of Green Lantern toys. They're like, no, it's different. They're like, doesn't look different.
Doesn't matter to them. Yeah, nobody wanted to buy the toys, so they were doomed from the beginning.
What's so fantastic about it, though, Green Lantern the animated series in particular, is that it really holds up. And as it shows up on like HBO Max or whatever, it has this second life a little bit, and you see people stumble upon it. And they're just like, wait, what is this show? And it's deceptively more. I mean, part of that is Bruce Timm too. The guy's exact, and he was just. I mean, his track record for DC superhero stuff is massive, And when I met him on Soul, I mean, I obviously met him, but not really on Green Lantern the animated series. And it was like, oh, this Bruce Timm. And I I kind of missed Batman the Animated Series. I was a little older, and I watched it. I was like, oh, this is cool, but I wasn't paying attention to who did what and whatever. And so there was a real reverence around Bruce, but I'm too stupid to know about reverence. I'm just like, hey, how's it going? And Jim was like, you can come to the recording session, but you have to stay quiet. You cannot say anything. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm sitting in the front of the recording session, and they're all there. Record Jason, everybody was there. And there was a line, and I hear Bruce go, what did the writer mean by this? Like, what does this mean? I don't understand. And Jim was like, yeah, I don't understand what he meant either. And I'm sitting there going like, I'm right here. But I also felt like it was a weird test. Like, don't say anything. That's the trick. They're tricking you. And he just kept going like, I wonder what the writer meant. I don't know. I wish he was here to tell us. Like, and they went on.
They secretly met beforehand and like, okay, we're gonna toy with this guy.
Yeah. And then I became really friendly with Bruce, and on Batman Soul of the Dragon, I was in the record, and writers aren't necessarily supposed to be in the record. I've been very fortunate. Wes Gleason, who's always an incredible voice director, I think I try to be contributing, but also not overbearing. But I'm sitting there with Bruce, and I could tell it was still like, even Bruce was like, this isn't a thing. You just, say what you want or whatever. And I finally, something happened, and I rose my hand like I was in third grade, and Bruce looks at me and he goes, well, okay, let's see what you got, and I said something, and he goes, that was pretty good. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Not 5 minutes later, I go, well, what about this? And he goes, back to being bad. But my point being that Bruce is exacting too. And like, you have Jim's heart, Giancarlo's images, and Bruce, and mashing it all together in a way that created this really incredible series that will stand the test of time for a long, long, long time.
I mean, all it takes is a jump start in popularity for the Green Lantern Corps, and it can come back. Things come back all the time. I mean, it doesn't take much.
In the visual sense, I hope, now James Gunn is running everything. I think he understands. I think he understands, like, thinking Guardians of the Galaxy in a way. I think he understands what a cosmic universe could be. I hope, but because
only time will tell.
I think all the Green Lantern fans understand what it is. I mean, when Jeff was writing and Tomasi was writing, and it was just like that 1-2 punch, like all the time, and it was just good. It was just good. Every issue I read, I was just like, this is the Star Wars, this is the universe, this is the thing. This was like Star Trek and all of it. It was just like, I don't know what's going to happen next. This is great. And it was building into all these wars and the emotional spectrum and all that stuff. It just kept going and going. It was really wild.
Yeah, it was a great roller coaster ride. That's for sure.
It was. And boy, they exploited the heck out of it. Like,
They did. That was a noteworthy time. And we always reference, it's always a reference point when somebody asks, where do I jump on with Green Lantern? Oh, just go to Jeff Johns, 2005, pick it up at the Rebirth. And that's usually an inception point for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about Jeff. Like, I had never met him until my friend Tim and I were doing Flashpoint Beyond. And because we were playing the Flashpoint universe, it was like, okay, we're going to, meet Jeff Johns. And then it was like, oh, I want to get Jeff on this. And I'm like, what? Huh? And I don't know what to expect. I read so much of his stuff. It's really a weird, like, okay, don't freak out, and you're hoping that he's a nice guy. Like, that's the other thing, because I've had too many times where I've met people I really like and they're terrible. And he was just like the nicest guy. And I kept going like, he has to be mean somewhere. And he just kept being nice. And we would get together and he'd be nice. And you're talking about this guy that literally has no reason ever to touch comic book work again. He's doing film and television, all this stuff. And let me tell you, comics don't pay that great. So he does it because he absolutely can't help himself, because he's in love with all these characters. I mean, he absolutely cannot help himself. And he's such a nerd like me. And we'll try to out, like, do you know about this, type thing. Half the time I'll say something and then I realize he's the one who created it, that, like, he exploits all those loopholes and stuff. And you're just sitting there and and you realize how the big swings he's taken in the DC universe and the things he's created within DC mythology, building on stuff that's gone before, is pretty massive, you know. So
It is.
it's pretty fun to know him and then kind of like try to surprise him a little bit, and then also realize, oh, I just said something he's already done, you know, or whatever. And he'll say something like, oh yeah, you know, he won't say it like, oh yeah, I did this thing, da, 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 da. And I'm like, of course you did that thing, I read that thing, like, you know, like in my head. This is stupid. I feel like an idiot sometimes, you know.
Well, Jeremy, this has been a real treat. I can't say thank you enough for coming on and spending some time with us.
Yeah, no, this has been a blast. Sorry if I jabbered on too much.
Not at all. It was funny when I had Giancarlo Volpe on. It was funny. He's like, I need about a half an hour or so. Yeah. So we're talking. Next thing you know, it's an hour and a half.
Yeah. And
I'm looking at the coast and I text him like, I don't know when to end it. Just going. We were having such a good conversation. It was great.
Yeah,
it's hard, but
it's really hard.
I want to be certainly respectful of your time and thank you again for coming on. And we are jazzed for this new series. I hope you can tell that we can't wait to see where it goes from here, and having the patience to see the story unfold and get to see your interpretation of Hal is going to be a lot of fun, I think.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And
I got to say that when reading the Flash, where you got me, when I was reading the Flash, when I heard you were taking over Lantern, I was like, oh, okay. I definitely know what's going to happen now. Well, not know what's going to happen, but I definitely was like, that's why it was easy for me to pick up the book and read it. It's not that I knew what to expect, but I knew I'd reading the Flash like I was like, all right, I know some of his writing.
Yeah.
I know that I'll be okay with going in Lantern with a clear head, clear conscience.
Anyway. Right. That's what I hope. I want to build up that trust, you know, because I'm a fan. So it's like, I'm not out to, I don't know, hurt anybody. You know what I mean?
We're a fan if we don't like the book or not.
Well, yeah. But
you know,
I'm a fan of superhero books. You know, like I'm reading it because I want to see a hero do heroic things. You know, I'm like I said, I'm not the guy that's like, you know, nobody's getting stuffed in fridges. You know, like that's you know what I mean? Like I just can't do it.
Well,
I gotcha. Cool, man.
Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. And we'll check in. Maybe we'll do like a half-year check-in.
All right.
You're on.
Okay. You're on. That'd be cool.
That'd be awesome. Hopefully I get on and you guys are like, oh, buddy. You know?
I have faith that that's not going to be what happens.
I don't think that's going to happen.
All right. I appreciate it.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of Oa.
Man, Myron, I tell you what, I love talking to writers, and I like when they reach out, and I love hearing about their passion, and it's interesting to know, like, I don't know, sometimes when you talk to somebody on the phone, it's one thing. Since this is video, this is new for us to do. You get a sense of the passion with Jeremy when he's talking about writing the Green Lantern book, and it's just like, how could you diminish the fandom that he exuberates when he's talking? I mean, listen to the guy.
Yeah. Well, you can see the enthusiasm and you can hear the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
He's one of us. He's a fan. So, you know, I feel like, and after reading the first issue, I feel like we're in really good hands. I haven't, you know, I liked the Morrison run, but I was also like, I remember talking to Peter Tomasi at a convention right before Morrison had been announced, and he told me what was coming up, and he goes to me, you know, the trick will be is what version of Morrison are you going to get?
Right.
And I was like, yeah, you know, and I enjoyed it, but a lot of people didn't enjoy it. I feel like this is, I get the same kind of enthusiasm and excitement I got when I started reading the Johns run. You know, it was like, oh, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. I'm excited about what they're going to do. I trust the writer's vision. I can tell just by looking at the first issue. And that's how I feel here.
Well, and it's not a retelling. It's not a rebirth. It's not a reestablishment. It almost feels like it's a jumping off point for something new. right? I mean, you keep in mind that a lot of stuff has happened preceding this. So, when was the last time we saw Hal? And now he's on Earth, and he's just in a different perception of time, in a different place that he hasn't been to for such a long time. It's like, it's a good jumping off point to get a refresher of content and
Right.
start telling a newer story moving forward. And when I went into this, I had a palate cleanser, man. I just, I didn't read for some stuff for a while. I wanted to go into it with fresh eyes. But I mean, and with all fairness to Jeremy, I've been reading his Flash stuff, his 1 Minute War and stuff leading up to this. So I knew his writing was good. And I kind of figured with how well he was doing on the Flash that he would peg the Lantern book as good as he did. And
Yeah.
he delivers.
Yeah. And one thing I respect highly is it would have been easy to have looked at the last run and just ignored it. But neither he nor Philip Kennedy Johnson are going to throw it by the wayside. They're letting the continuity stay, which as a fan, you want that, regardless of whether you liked it or didn't like it.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
You want to see things continue because even, like I said, even though we didn't like it, some people did. And for them, they don't want to see the baby thrown out with the bathwater. I mean, we've been through that before with other writers and other books. I'm glad they're finding the way. Well, okay, let's take that and let's build on it and not let's ignore it.
Well, and at the end of the day, you and I have always talked about this. We may not have liked it. I've never said in my entire time ever talking on a podcast with you, I've never said get rid of it entirely. It shouldn't even be involved.
No,
I never said that. I mean, sure, should it be there? Absolutely. It's still part of the collective.
right. Exactly.
So I'm not saying but I don't like that particular part of it. So
right. But at least they're looking at, well, how can I use that to tell the story I want to tell? Versus how do I throw it out and ignore it? So I kudos to DC and both writers for doing that. And speaking of both writers, we will be talking with Philip Kennedy Johnson in the next episode. So I'm excited to continue our kind of a launch party for Green Lantern. This episode comes out before the issue is released, and the next episode will come out after the episode is released. So we're going to kind of be bookends. I hope people enjoy this video format. And please, if you're watching us on YouTube, give us some feedback that will help us make the show better, because this is new for us and we're noobs at doing the YouTube thing. And, we're both middle-aged guys sitting in our dens talking Green Lantern. So we definitely could benefit by any creative feedback you have. And we're going to try to keep it as authentic as we always do. Won't be able to do as much editing because it's video and I don't want to spend a lot of time doing that. So, I look forward to this kind of exciting new venture, and we'll see how it goes. We're going to test the waters.
Okay, that's great.
All right. So until next time, treat each other well, keep your power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day. Thanks so much for watching this Green Lantern video from the blog of Oa. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find even more great Green Lantern videos, reviews, podcasts, and more at our main website, www.blogofoa.com. So until next time, keep your power ring charged and make every day your brightest day.